Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Praktisch Theologisch Kirche. Mir gegenüber sitzen wieder einmal Kaya Kaiser und Michael Herbst. Hallo, ihr zwei.
Hallo.
Und es ist mir jetzt eine ganz große Ehre und er weiß auch gar nicht, was ich hier sage, denn er spricht Englisch. Es ist unser Ehrengast heute, Tod Bolsinger. Hi, Tod.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon for you. So.
Yes, ihr müsst wissen, heute gibt es ein kleines Experiment. Wir werden diese Folge gleich auf Englisch switchen, nachdem ich Tod vorgestellt habe, denn er sitzt gerade an der Westküste der Vereinigten Staaten von Amerika. Er hat gerade eine sehr frühe Uhrzeit für uns dankenswerterweise in Anspruch genommen, weil wir jetzt Nachmittag haben dürfen. Das ist wunderbar. Und wer ist denn dieser Tod Bolsinger? Das werde ich euch jetzt noch auf Deutsch erzählen. Und danach werden wir das Gespräch auf Englisch führen. Das heißt, ihr dürft euch auf einen zweisprachigen Podcast heute freuen und uns auch, das sage ich jetzt schon mal, im Nachhinein dann verraten, wie das für euch war. Wie wir uns geschlagen haben mit Englisch, weil es ist unser erster englischer Podcast. Und auch, wie ihr es fandet, so einen besonderen Gast aus dem englischsprachigen Raum einzuladen und einen Podcast auf Englisch zu machen. Das waren jetzt genügend Ansagen am Anfang. Jetzt kommen wir aber zu unserem Gast, nämlich Tod Bolsinger. Er kommt gebürtig aus den USA und wurde 1993 in der Presbyterianischen Kirche ordiniert und dann von 1997 bis 2014 leitender Pastor der Clemente Presbyterian Church. Davor war er stellvertretender Pastor für Jüngerschaft und geistliche Bildung an der First Presbyterian Church of Hollywood. Ich habe diese Begriffe übrigens übersetzt aus dem Englischen, also falls es nicht ganz so präzise ist, seht es mir nach. Ich habe versucht, das auf Deutsch zu übersetzen. Jedenfalls unterrichtet er seit 2014 am Fuller Theological Seminary. Wer das Fuller Theological Seminary nicht kennt, das liegt in Pasadena im Los Angeles County. Und das ist laut Wikipedia das weltweit größte evangelikale theologische Seminar mit über 4000 Studentinnen und Studenten aus über 90 Ländern und 110 Denominationen. Also ein riesiges Teil. Und da ist er angestellt. Derzeit ist er als leitender Gemeindestratege und außerordentlicher Professor für Führungskräfteausbildung tätig. Er hat einen Doktortitel in Theologie und einen Master of Divinity von dem Fuller Seminary. Und er hat mehrere Bücher geschrieben, wie zum Beispiel How Not to Waste a Crisis, Quit Trying Harder von 2024 oder The Mission Always Wins, Quit Appeasing Stakeholders, auch aus dem gleichen Jahr. Und heute legen wir den Fokus auf sein Buch von 2015, Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory. Also davon gleich mehr. Warum wir ihn jetzt gerade jetzt eingeladen haben, ist, weil er ganz frisch im Frühjahr diesen Jahres bei der Willow Creek Leadership Konferenz in Dortmund war. Und vielleicht hat der eine oder die andere von euch ihn da gesehen und gehört und wir dachten, hey, das war so gut, den wollen wir jetzt bei uns haben. Das gesagt, werde ich jetzt auf Englisch übergehen und freue mich ganz besonders auf dieses Gespräch. Okay, Tod. Now, I told everybody who's listening that you're a huge fan of Borussia Dortmund.
My favorite German band club at the moment.
Well, yeah, no, I just introduced you, but we have at the beginning of every podcast, whenever we have guests, we ask them the same questions, and I would like to start today with the second question because I already brought it up. What goes through your mind when you hear Borussia Dortmund?
Well, mostly what goes through my mind is the big yellow wall. I got the chance to be right next to it and watch it for an entire game, screaming my lungs out, enjoying every bit of it. It was a big game where they won but they scored many goals. It was fun. It was nothing but fun. So,
and I'm sure, Michael, you like to hear that as a big Borussia
course.
fan.
But I have to say, since Tod left Germany again, Borussia lost nearly every game. So it was the last big success with this four goals against Mainz 05. Yeah.
You need to come back.
Yeah,
Do you hear that?
Sure.
anytime. So.
Okay, I will start. I will continue with the first question. What accompanies you through your everyday life right now? A book, a series, music, or a podcast, and why can't you get it out of your head?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these days, what has accompanied me through everyday life is a lot of preparing for the next book I'm writing. So I'm working on a book, and any of you, Michael, you probably know when you're working on a book, it's like all you do is think about that. And so the book I'm working on, it's taking me a lot about the church. It's about organizations. It's about the way in which people are formed for a changing world, as opposed to being formed for the past. And I've done 5 years of research, and now I'm getting ready to write, and all I do is think about it every waking moment, and mostly make my wife bored of it.
If anything was possible, how would your next day look like?
If anything is possible, my next day would be outside. That would be the thing. If I can be, I live in a beautiful little mountain resort community, and every day that it's sunny and it's beautiful and I can get outside, doesn't matter winter or summer or whatever season, if I'm playing outside, I'm a happy man.
Sounds great. And our last question for the beginning, if you had the opportunity to talk to your younger self, what advice would you give him?
Oh, smile more. I was an intense younger man, and as I'm getting older, I'm working on being a bit less intense, a bit more warm, rather than trying to be so cool all the time. So yeah, I think I would say smile more, relax a bit more.
Well, those who are listening to us right now, you can't see how he's smiling at the moment. So I would say it's quite working.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Thank you. Michael, I would like to give the word to you because before we started recording, you already told us that you have been impressed by reading Tod's book, Canoeing the Mountains.
Yes, I really enjoyed reading this book, and it was very inspiring. So we would like to talk with you, Tod, about this book. Canoeing the Mountains, it's a great American story. Thomas Jefferson, as a president of the United States, sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, Lewis and Clark, to find a waterway from the east, from St. Louis, westward to the Pacific Ocean. And the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1804 till 1806 is one of the most exciting stories of exploration that I know. The two led their crew up the Missouri River to its source. But then things became difficult, even though their goal was so close. Why did it get things a little bit messy?
Well, the big thing was everybody of European descent assumed that there was one water route that they could connect the Missouri River to what is now called the Columbia River. Everybody just assumed it to be there because for the better part of 300 years, everybody of European descent had been trying to find a water route that would connect the east to the west because it was good for economics. If it's good for economics, then it can be good for power and all those things. And what they discovered after 18 months of going upstream up the Missouri River is that there was a giant mountain range, not quite the Alps, but almost like the Alps, like a giant mountain range right in the middle that nobody of European descent had ever seen. And they realized at that moment that the world in front of them was completely different than the world behind them. And that though they were expert water navigators, they now had to adapt and become people who could discard their canoes and travel over mountains. And that's pretty hard if all your skills are in water navigation.
How did they solve the problem? Did they paddle across the Rockies?
Yeah, they had to drop the canoe. They do two big things. One is they had to drop the canoes, and they had to reframe their entire goal. Their goal now wasn't discovering a water route. It was discovering a whole new world. And that also meant that they had to listen to people who they hadn't been used to listening to. Most famously is a teenage Native American nursing mother named Sacagawea. We learned her name as Sacagawea in high school, and the difference in the pronunciation is significant because it really was that English couldn't understand how to read her name, and what the Lewis and Clark had written down her name phonetically, and her name was Sacagawea. She was probably 16 or 17 years old, and she became their guide, and she led them as translator to the Shoshone tribe, who helped them get through the mountains. And the leadership lesson is that when you're an expert at one form of communication, of ministry, of organization, and you reach a different day, the world changes, you're going to have to adapt and no longer rely on your old expertise. You're going to have to be willing to let things go, and you're going to have to be willing to learn, and sometimes learn from people you're not used to learning from. And so that combination of learning and letting go and navigating competing values is at the heart of what is called adaptive leadership.
So this is a big lesson about leadership, but why is it also a metaphor for our congregations, and especially for our work in leading congregations? What are our challenges, our Rockies, and our canoes?
Yeah. So the easiest place to start is with the canoes. Just think of the canoes as all of our traditions or our programs or our approaches to ministry that got us here, that brought us this far. Sometimes they've been centuries old. Sometimes in like newer movements, like the people I was talking to at the Willow conference, they might be a couple of decades old, but they've been very successful, or they're very beloved. They're traditions that are cherished. And you come to this moment where you realize, because the world is different today, they're not working. And it's very hard. It's hard to let them go, right? It's think about the number of churches that had to let Latin go in order to translate the Bible so that ordinary people could read it, right? I mean, like that was like one of the giant adaptations led by a pretty famous German, right? So, right, like that notion is really hard. If everybody who's in leadership and in power speaks Latin, and if the church uses Latin, and all of a sudden you say, we now have people that we're trying to minister to who don't speak Latin, so we're going to have to translate everything into our local language. That's not just a technical challenge, like actually doing the translation. There's also the deeper adaptive work, which is you have to change the way your attitudes about it, your behaviors. In some ways, even your values. Like, who now is a leader is not just someone who's fluent in Latin, but could be a local person who is well respected by the community. That changes things. And so that work that has been done over and over and over again, I think has to be done especially today, because the world is changing so fast, so dramatically. If we don't have the capacity to adapt, which is to not discard our deepest values, but to adapt them to the changing world, then we'll not be relevant and we'll not be able to minister people and accomplish our mission.
So today we're not so inclined to speak Latin in our worship services. So where do you see the challenges today? What are our canoes in our church tradition today, which we have to leave behind or burn?
Yeah. So I think one of the big ones is the reliance on big programs. Many churches believe that if we could gather big crowds of people, either in a worship service with music that is contemporary that everybody liked, or by having lots of different small groups that meet people exactly where they are, that the big organized programs would take us forward. And programs are good. Remember, canoes are good. These aren't bad things. But all of a sudden, what happens when you now have a younger generation that says, we're not so interested in church as a big event, and quite frankly, we would like to be in different kinds of groups. We have different kinds of questions. We don't even know if we think the scriptures are valuable to us. Why do we start with a Bible study if we're not convinced that the scriptures are different than other sacred texts? Like all of a sudden you realize you're asking different questions. You need different modes of transportation to take us through that. You need different ways of thinking. And what's hard for it is that most of us who are in leadership, the programs that we used worked for us, right? So if you're trained in the old programs, it's like being trained in Latin. And so now all of a sudden you're facing a different day, and you have to, many of them we don't have an answer for. We're going to have to learn as we go. We're going to have to experiment. And experimenting is really hard when you're talking about sacred community.
So when we look at the general situation of the Christian faith and the Christian church, I think it's even more challenging. Charles Taylor says the days of Christian dominance are over and won't come back. Those are Christendom days. We're in a post-Christendom era. And the Christian faith is just one option among many. What then is the future and the mission of the Christian church in such a cultural situation? Hold on to what we have, or be a faithful minority, or try to fight and win back the masses? So what should we do in this post-Christendom era?
Well, you're right at the heart of what is happening in lots of places in the West, where the culture is arguing over the future. And in many ways, the church is participating in that argument in ways that are much more like the culture than they are like the church. So the idea that we should be a Christian culture is actually something that the New Testament wouldn't have understood. They would have said the church is supposed to be a community that functions in every culture. As the illustration they used was salt, right? Salt that seasons, that preserves, a bit of light that goes into the darkness. You don't want salt to become the dominant taste, because then it's just salty. And you don't want salt to lose its flavor, Jesus said, because then it tastes like everything else. So a big part of our work today is trying to convince churches and work with churches who now know they're not the dominant. They know they're not dominant, that instead of falling back into kind of political power or sociological power, or trying to restore its status in the community, to be salt and light, to be something that actually brings life to people who are feel like they have lost their flavor, they've lost their purpose, they've lost their meaning, or that they're walking in darkness. How can we be small examples of hope that season and work throughout every culture? And that's a big change if you think that what we're supposed to be is dominant. And that's a loss. That's a big mental model loss.
If this team going through the Rockies, how did the leaders manage to convince the team to follow them? I mean, if you talk to canoe people, like burn your canoe and come follow me, we go through the Rockies and we don't know what's going to happen. How did they do it? Did they all follow, or did some go back? Yeah. And how do we do that in our position now?
Yeah, Kaya, it's a great question, because I think about it all the time, and yet there's almost no conversation about it in the journals. So it's very interesting. So this is what I think. The most important thing to realize about this group, they were called the Core of Discovery, is that they had 18 months to become a deeply unified team. When they started the journey, they were just like a military unit. They used military order. They used military discipline. They gave a lot of orders. They told people what they had to do. But 18 months later of traveling together, they actually became a deeply trusting team, a community that cared for each other. And it's interesting because one of the men that was in there asked for permission to leave, not to go back, but because he wanted to actually go explore more. He wanted to go further. And he became the person who discovered, from a European point of view, Native Americans have been there. He was the first European person to see the area that we now know as Yellowstone National Park. And so his name is John Coulter, and he's famous in the United States for people who talk about explorers. He was part of the Corps of Discovery, and they let him go. They just said, okay, if you want to do that, you can. So there was permission, and it was very interesting, but none of the people in the Corps of Discovery wanted to go back home. They wanted to continue the journey. And I think they had a high degree of trust. And I think they all of a sudden realized they were part of something much bigger than themselves. This was bigger than finding a water route that would be good for the economic prosperity of the young United States. They were discovering the world, and they wanted to be part of that project. And so I think it's a very interesting, there's no conversation about whether they wrestled with it. Meriwether Lewis said, we proceeded on, and they just all kept going. And imagine being told, you come on this trip because you're an expert water navigator, an expert canoeer. Now you're just going to carry luggage and you're going to walk. But they went anyway. Yeah.
That is in a way surprising, because you're talking in your book about a typical human behavior, that people tend to stick to their traditional things, to what they learned in the past, although the landscape has completely changed and what they learned is not good enough for what is necessary today. So why is it that people tend to go back to what they learned in the past?
Yeah, so the way I talk about it most easily is that we like things that are familiar. Now we're talking English, so you might have to figure out how to translate this. But in English, the word familiar is very similar to the word family. So what you end up with is in German as well. Okay, so you realize what you have is we like things that remind us of home. We want to be comfortable. So if you go and do something that is unfamiliar, you don't just feel disoriented, you feel unfamilied. You feel abandoned. You feel like you're alone. And that's very scary, even internally for people. And Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky got a Nobel Prize talking about this, because he said that they've said that the human brain is wired to reject loss 3 times more than the possible gains. We are 3 times more afraid of loss than we are of gain. So if we say, hey, if we make these changes, our church is going to change, we're going to reach younger people, maybe our children will come back to church, our young people will come back to church, we'll be very excited. But then what will happen in our brains is we will make up 3 times more problems with doing that than even something as dear to us as the idea that our children, our grandchildren would come to church, right? That we are really afraid of loss. And the book I'm working on now is really, how do you help disciple and form a community to be able to face their fears and embrace their losses for the sake of a mission? Because what the church has mostly done in the West is told people, do not be afraid and don't worry, it'll be great. And people don't believe it, because that's not the way human nature is wired. So you actually have to form people to hear these scripture passages where Jesus says over and over and over again, do not be afraid. When I say that, I don't think Jesus is shaming them, wagging his finger saying, don't be afraid. What are you afraid of? I think he's saying, you're afraid. I got you. I got you. Don't be afraid. I got you. Do not be afraid. And Jesus also tells us that we're going to have to lay down our lives. Like we're going to have to pick up our crosses, that we're going to have to be like the seed that falls to the earth and dies. Like the Christian faith is filled with needing to face fears that are very human and embrace losses that are very real. But we demonstrate our faith in Christ and the transformation of Christ and the power of the community when we can go through those together for a mission that is bigger than myself, my own people.
You're talking about leadership and trust. And one of the main ideas is that people follow leaders when they are leading well on the map before they start following them when they have to lead off the map.
Yes.
Can you explain this a little bit for us?
Yeah. So think about the Lewis and Clark story that, Kaya asked, why didn't they go back? Well, up until that moment, they were on the map. There were maps. They were following the river that everybody had followed. What they were doing at that moment, other people had done. But I think in that 18 months between when they left St. Louis, it's actually a little place called St. Charles, which is next to St. Louis. Like they left St. Charles, Missouri, and they went up the Missouri River. All that time, they were demonstrating that they were trustworthy leaders, that they cared about the men, they were competent to lead the mission, that they were good at doing what they did. You could trust them. So trust done on the map, which for me in the church means trust is the way we handle the scriptures. And trust is built by the way we handle people's souls when they come and talk to you about spiritual things. Do you care for them and love them and bring them the truth of God? Trust is built by the way we handle our church. Can people trust you to give money because it's going to be spent well? And can people trust you that your children will be safe if they're involved in the program? And can people trust you that you're not going to lie to them, that you're going to tell them the truth, and that this isn't just about your ego as a leader? Like all those things, those ordinary things that build trust, that are built on both competence and character, build trust so that when the day comes, when you have to ask them to do something really hard, which is we're no longer going to be just about us. We're going to actually change to reach our neighbors. We're no longer just going to be about our kids, but what about neighborhood kids who don't know Jesus, who aren't comfortable coming to church? How are we going to make them comfortable? Right? When we start having to, you want me to preach on certain Bible passages because you know the Bible. What about people who've never heard the scriptures? So we're going to start changing our approach in order, because our mission is changing. You're going to have to trust me, and we're going to have to trust each other as a community that what we're doing is based on our mission and not just on our desire to be relevant or have a lot of, Instagram followers or something, right?
In your book, you say that that you can't go alone, but you haven't succeeded until you've survived the sabotage.
Yeah.
And this, it sounded not so nice, not so familiar, not so secure for me.
Yeah.
Could you explain to us what does it mean, the sabotage?
Yeah, Benjamin. The single biggest question I get out of Canoeing the Mountains was on sabotage. So I wrote a book called Tempered Resilience, which is how do you survive sabotage? And then after that, people asked me even more. So I wrote another book called Leading Through Resistance. Like, this is the big challenge. This is the single biggest challenge, especially for leaders. And here's why. We think sabotage comes from bad people, evil people out there trying to stop the mission of God. Sabotage doesn't come from evil people, from bad people doing evil things. It comes from humans who are anxious. I always say sabotage is not the bad things that evil people do. It is the human things that anxious people do. And usually they're our own people. The most difficult thing for most leaders, and this is the place where probably if any of your leaders who are listening to this, if they hear this part, this is where they'll be nodding. The thing that makes people want to stop being pastors or leave church or give up and do something else, or maybe just decide I just want to make a lot of money and I don't want to give my life to the gospel, is never the challenges of the world. Most of us are up for that. We understand that we're on a mission. It's when our own people, other Christians, stop, get in the way, make it about them, sabotage the mission. That notion is so powerful that most of our work is on how to help leaders take resistant congregations through the change so they won't sabotage, so that they won't make it about them. In the scriptures, the big Bible story about this, if you want to read it, that I talk about a lot, is the story of the Exodus. After the Exodus, when the Hebrews were freed from God, from Egypt, they get across the Red Sea, and 6 weeks later, they want to go back. 6 weeks. 6 weeks later. Why? Because it got hard out there. They didn't have as much food as they thought. And 6 weeks later, they're saying, slavery's better than being out here in the desert. Let's go back. And Moses has to say to them, look up and see what the Lord will do, right? And God provides them manna every morning. He provides them miraculous food every morning to remind them that he is with them, and they keep going. And then you go through years and years, and then later on in the journey, they do it again. They go, maybe we should go back.
Keep complaining.
Yeah, in Numbers chapter 11. And now they're complaining. What's so interesting, Kaya, they're complaining not because they're hungry. They have manna every morning. They're bored with the miracle that God does every morning. Like, oh, manna again? I wish we could have leeks and onions. And so they want to go back. And this is so hard. Moses is so disappointed and so angry that he literally says to God, if you leave me with these people, you can kill me now. Like, you can, I'd rather die than be their leader. I mean, that challenge is what I call a failure of heart. There was a scholar named Ed Friedman who talked about a failure of nerve. A failure of nerve is where we collude with the anxiety of our people and we stop the mission. It's where we do go back. It's like where we say, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to stop changing our church. We're going to make our people comfortable. We're not going to worry about our neighbors. We're going to make it about ourselves. That's a failure of nerve. But some leaders who don't have a failure of nerve end up becoming angry and cynical and have what I call a failure of heart. And what you have to do is sabotage will cause both of those to happen. And what you have to do is figure out how to be faithful to the mission and stay faithful and connected to your people, even when they are resisting you. And that's the single biggest thing we work on with our consulting and our coaching. How do you keep leading your people who are resisting you? And you see this all the way through the scriptures, don't you? But we've forgotten that this is part of what faithful leadership looks like.
This was one of the parts of your book where I really stopped reading and had to reflect and read again and again, because I think many of our listeners will have this experience and how hard it is to stick to your mission and stay connected to the people and not let one of them go, but stick to both connections, to your mission and to the people. And so I asked myself, how do you survive such a situation emotionally and spiritually?
Yeah. So in the book, Tempered Resilience, that's what I work on, is the spiritual practices that help you to do that. How to develop the resilience and flexibility. That's why it's called tempered resilience. It's like a chisel that has been tempered out of steel so that it's both strong and flexible. But what you also do is have to figure out how to actually lead your people. What do I do besides just tell them that we're going to keep going, right? And that's where the little blue book, Leading Through Resistance, is about. It's about how do you actually accompany people through their loss. So here's one simple way. Most of us as pastors know how to comfort people who have lost a loved one. We have done funerals. We walk with people through grief. We are really good at that. What we're not good at is taking people through the grief of the losses they choose for the sake of the gospel. And we see this in the early church. There was a lot of this conversation. People who ended up, they're women who ended up being divorced, and the church had to take them in as they called them widows sometimes because their husbands left them, right? Young people who lost families. And if you've known anybody who's come from a part of the world where Christianity is not accepted, you have immigrants who sometimes show up in our doorstep and they want to be Christians and their families have rejected them. Like, we understand what it's like to walk people through that. Well, what is it like to walk a church that chooses to let go some of its power, some of its privilege, some of its programs, some of their things that helped us in the past for the sake of our mission? That's a kind of loss, and we have to take people through it. So it's very much grief work, but it's a grief work for the sake of mission, not just for the sake of comfort. And that's really different.
Yes. We have this situation in our local church at the moment because we want to remove the pews from the church and take chairs to be more flexible and to be more in communion with one another. And most people enjoy the idea, and some hate it because they have built this church 60 years ago, and
Yes.
they love their pews, and I understand that they love their pews, and we still have to stick to this idea of a church being a communion of people sitting together more in a circle than in rows.
Yes. Yeah. And so, Michael, think about this. If we are just having a logical conversation, oh, we're going to change pews to rows, to chairs, just pews to chairs. It's just changing the kind of seating. That's technical. We can get a carpenter. We can get a moving company. We can get some people to move it. The adaptive change is the change of the heart of people, so that they realize what those pews meant. Because I remember my grandmother sitting next to me in this pew. I gave money to make sure there were these pews. Families used to all huddle in pews together, and the kids could sit on your lap. Like, oh, this now feels like a movie theater. It feels like a school. It doesn't feel like a church. Well, what they have to do is actually face the losses that some of those memories are really important to us. We're going to keep those memories, but we're going to change our behaviors. And that's very hard. It's really hard. One of my favorite quotes by Gustav Mahler is, tradition is the tending of the fire, not the preserving of the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're really doing is we're tending the fire. We want a church that is a community that you remember. But to do so, we're going to actually have to get rid of the ashes of the pews that no longer serve us, because it keeps us in rows, keeps us from talking to one another, keeps visitors from feeling as if they can't participate. It seems trivial, but it's really profoundly hard.
Close to the end of your book, you say everybody will be changed in this procedure, especially the leader. Yeah. Maybe this is a good, that summarizes the point of the book, is it?
Yeah, that summarizes, and it summarizes my own story as a leader. Like what I had to grapple with was, if I want to keep leading the people of God into the future, the actual future that we're facing, not the church that I came into when I was a teenager back in 1979, right? If I actually am going to be part of leading the church into the day we have today, then as the leader, I'm going to have to change. So the simplest one I could tell you is, I'm a pretty good preacher. And most of my life, I believed that if I could just preach a good enough sermon, I could lead the mission forward. Today, I realize in most churches, there's a lot of empty seats. People aren't even showing up to listen to my sermons. So now what do I have to do, right? Now, how do I approach that? That's really the change. And it starts with the leaders being willing themselves to change and to feel our own loss and our own letting go of our canoes, and then inviting other people into that process with us.
All right. Thank you for taking us on that journey. Canoes and our canoes. At the end of our podcasts, we used to open a journal and write down about the things we really want to stick to and remind ourselves to. And we do that now, and we do it in German, and maybe we try to translate it for you later.
Please do.
Benny, was schreibst du dir auf?
Ja, ich schreibe mir einiges auf, danke. Und vor allem das mit der Sabotage, dass sie nicht von bösen Menschen kommt, die böse Dinge tun wollen, sondern von Menschen, die Angst haben. Und dass die Kunst ist, Menschen weiterzuleiten, die sich gegen mich wehren, also die meine Pläne sabotieren, aber nicht aus Böswilligkeit heraus. Und weil wir jetzt so lange auf Englisch gesprochen haben, vermute ich, die meisten, die jetzt noch zuhören, werden auch das verstehen, wenn ich es jetzt auch gerade auf Englisch sage. Deswegen, Todd, I just told the others that I really found the point with the sabotage interesting, I didn't have that in my mind, but it convinces me that it's important for me to continue to lead people who resist my leadership, not out of bad will, but because of anxiousness. Maybe because I'm a bad leader, then it's my problem, but also that I don't give up during that process.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, what do you want to keep or especially present now?
Ja, mein Takeaway. Ich bin an derselben Stelle, Benjamin. Ich kann jetzt nichts Originelles sagen, weil es mich an der Stelle beim Lesen schon und heute nochmal in unserem Gespräch besonders erwischt hat, auch emotional erwischt hat. Ich kenne das sehr, sehr gut aus den Gemeinden, in denen ich war, wie das ist, wenn man mit Widerstand zu tun hat. Und wie schwer es ist, beides zusammenzuhalten, auf Kurs zu bleiben, weil es nicht um eine persönliche Überzeugung geht, sondern wirklich um einen Ruf von Gott. Und auf der anderen Seite mit den Menschen verbunden zu bleiben und nicht in entweder so einen Rückzug zu gehen, so eine kalte Aggression, aber auch nicht nur noch im Angriffsmodus zu leben, sondern mit ihnen verbunden zu bleiben und weiterzuringen. Das finde ich genau richtig und sagenhaft schwer. So I was again talking about sabotage and resistance, and that I completely agree with what you said, and I find it so hard. I had this experience in several congregations where I served, that I wanted to move on, and there was resistance, and it was so hard to stick to the mission and be connected to the people and not getting in an aggressive mode or in a very passive aggressive mode, and to retire from them or to go back from them. So this was a very emotional part of our talk and of my lecture in your book.
Thank you.
Kaya.
Ich kann da ein großes Ausrufezeichen dran machen. Finde es aber auch richtig spannend, wie viel die Angst hier drin hängt. Und bin echt gespannt auf das Buch, was er jetzt angesprochen hat, was kommen soll, weil das da Leute sabotieren, weil sie selbst Angst haben, weil da ganz viel Angst vor dem Unbekannten, was da kommt, ist. Das finde ich sehr schlüssig. Und da finde ich dann die spannende Frage, wie begegnen wir dieser Angst? Auch weil ja da auch noch unsere eigene Angst drin steckt, nicht angenommen zu werden, nicht als Leiter das tun zu können, was wir tun wollen und Co. Und ich finde da den Punkt spannend, dass dieses Team, was dann durch die Rockies da gelaufen ist, 18 Monate zusammen war und dieses Vertrauen zueinander aufgebaut hat und dass das Angst besiegen kann, wenn wir so an unseren Gemeinschaften arbeiten. Da denke ich weiter. So I tried to translate that in English. I was thinking about the big point of fear which is going through all of this. So the people who are afraid of change, are afraid of following the mission the way I suggest as a leader. And I'm thinking about if the point about the 18-month together is a kind of a solution for it, so that this is stronger than the fear. And yeah, the big question is, how do we form those teams? How do we build up the connection to people so that it is bigger than the fear? Yeah.
Bigger than the fear. Beautiful. Yeah.
And you mentioned that fear is on both sides.
Yeah.
On the side of the people in the church who are afraid of change, and on our side, because we are afraid not to be accepted, not to be acknowledged as good leaders and good ministers. Yeah.
Afraid of failure, afraid of
failure. Yeah. This is a good encouragement for me as I'm writing my next book, because this is what I'm working on. So thank you. It's nice. It's a nice way to spend the day. Yeah.
All right. And I was saying that I'm looking forward to this book, and maybe we need to call again.
Good. I would enjoy that.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing with us. for leading us through all those thoughts. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to hear from our listeners how it was for them. Und deswegen jetzt nochmal auf Deutsch. Vielen Dank auch für euch, dass ihr zugehört habt, auch mit unserem Englisch, mit unserem Versuch mal jetzt über den großen Teich rüber und manches von den amerikanischen Gedanken noch mitzunehmen. Wir sind gespannt von euch zu hören, wie es für euch war. Ihr könnt uns wie immer finden unter praktisch-theologisch-kirche.de. Wir freuen uns, wenn wir von euch hören. Ihr könnt gerne auch weiter erzählen, dass man diesmal mal hören kann, wie wir Englisch reden und vor allen Dingen über spannende Expeditionen mehr lernen kann und was das mit uns heute zu tun hat. Ihr könnt uns auch gerne Rückmeldung geben, wie das für euch war, was ihr vorschlagen würdet für vielleicht folgende Sachen auf Englisch oder eben nicht. Wir freuen uns, da mehr zu hören. Wenn ihr davon mehr lesen wollt, können wir die Bücher sehr empfehlen. Die kommen auch wieder in die Shownotes. Also, wie ihr gehört habt, hat Tod Bolsinger einiges geschrieben. Und es sind spannende Sachen dabei. Ich glaube, damit sind wir am Ende, verabschieden uns. Thanks a lot, Tod, and hope to hear you again.
My pleasure. You guys were all very kind and very good. That was fun. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
And don't forget, you never walk alone.
Indeed.